Hello again, everyone. We're back here with another rapid game playthrough here on chess.com. Let's see if we can get another good opponent here. We're starting off with a rating of 1824 in this video at this point, and let's see if we can get a good game going. So we have a game here against Eduardo, 6-1, 1995, I think. They are rated 1814, and I believe that's Mexico there, yep. Okay, so we d4, we go knight f6, c4. I'm going to go for kind of a at least in the direction of the Binko Gambit here, assuming they play d5, I'm going to go b5 here. If they don't do d5, we'll kind of see what happens. e3 is an option, knight f3 is a move. d5 is definitely the most common or most challenging move, I would say, in regards to the opening choice here. So if they go knight f3, they do go b5 or d5, okay? I'm going to go for b5 for the Binko Gambit here. And so white has a number of options in response to this. So they decide to go for c4, or sorry, b3, protecting c4. And there are some inherent downsides of b3. Whenever I do end up fianchettoing the bishop, I'm going to be directly eyeing the rook there. So that's a little bit of a drawback of this particular setup for sure. I can also look to just take on c4 and play things like e6. And white gets a little bit of a tough spot protecting the pawn. I could also go b4, taking away the c3 square from the knight, where the knight now is be forced to go to d2 at some point. But I think I'm going to lean towards... I think I'm leaning towards trading the pawn, followed by e6. That's at least what I'm thinking for the moment here. Doing e6 right away is fine as well, because even though it does lose a pawn, I get a big center. That's also another option. But we're going to go for the trade and then play e6 here. An idea here that's potential is maybe even like knight takes, pawn takes, queen f6, which would then be trapping the rook in the corner, so white would have to give a piece up at that point. So knight to c3 is played. I'm going to go ahead and trade on d5 here. Probably the pawn will take back. And then we're going to go g6, bishop g7, d6, castle. We're going to kind of have a Benoni. It's a little bit more of a Benoni setup. But the nice thing is the queen side's already been opened up a little bit, and usually that's the direction black wants to play in anyways. So I will have open b-file ideas. I could also have played bishop a6 and maybe traded these bishops before playing g6 here. But yeah, I'm going to go bishop g7, castle, and especially because this diagonal's already open, white's already got to be a bit careful about some of the things going on here. If I go bishop g7, e5, let's see. If I play queen e7 for the pin, white can play queen e2. So I don't know if that necessarily works here. I guess I might just throw in d6 first. And then bishop g7, castle. If they make the check, I'll probably just block with the bishop. But the idea is just to simply bishop g7, castle, and that's going to be looking fine for me. This diagonal is especially strong for me. It's not as good for him because if he plays bishop b2, there's always rook b8 or queen b6. So the fact of these pawns being traded off helps me out, I would think, a little bit more than it helps out white. So for that reason, I think I already have a little bit of a favorable opening setup. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily better in this position as black, but at least compared to a normal Benoni, it seems to be like I would be relatively happy here. So okay, so bishop d3, okay. Let's go bishop to g7. We're threatening now things like knight takes e4 due to the pin. So for example, if knight f3, I guess knight takes e4, there's queen e2. Well, queen e2 I take on c3, so yeah, knight takes e4 is a threat. Then I guess queen a4 is annoying. But then, like, worst case scenario, I just move the king, and I still have bishop takes c3 as an idea. So yeah, that still looks good. So I think knight takes e4 is a threat here. Probably needs to play like knight e2 to protect their knight. Where white really wants his pieces, he wants a knight on c4, the bishop on f4, helping to attack this backward d6 pawn. That's kind of the ideal setup. So if he has to play knight e2, this knight is far away from the c4 square. So knight e2 is not really the ideal location, I would say, for the knight to be on. Bishop to b2, okay. I'm going to go ahead and castle, I think. Taking here, the bishop would just take back now, because this bishop is protected. If I go queen b6, I guess rook b1 should be okay. So I think I'm going to castle. Now, there are ideas here now of playing knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, trade on c3, and then like rook e8. So he plays knight e2, okay? So the knight's on that e2 square, which we had already noted was a not an ideal location for the knight, I'd say. Rook e8, white just castles. I don't really think there's too much going on there. If I take, bishop takes, rook takes, knight takes, essentially white ends up with being up the exchange there, so that's not in my favor. I'm probably leaning towards here like knight to d7, c4, knight c5, these kind of ideas. So we're going to go knight d7. Knight e5 is also a good spot for a piece to end up on. Knight e5. If the bishop moves, then knight c4, hit this bishop. If the bishop doesn't move, I can take d3 and then play things like a5 and bishop a6, which is a good location for my bishop to be on. If he plays f4, I always have the idea of c4, bishop takes, queen b6, forking the king and the bishop there. So I'm anticipating either f4 or maybe kingside castling. Oops. But yeah, I don't exactly know what white's plan is here, because usually, like I said, the knight wants to be here and the bishop wants to be here. But because of the setup of white's pieces, it's not really, there's really no productive plan. Another plan is to play f4 and e5, but usually you want the knight on f3 to support that push. Again, the knight on e2 is not in a, not really in an ideal location. So he does castle. Do I go c4 or knight e5 right away? Kind of leaning towards knight e5. If I go c4 and the bishop moves away, there is knight d4 available, which is a bit of a annoying location for the knight, because it can always get to c6. I don't really want to throw in rook b8 anytime soon, because I kind of want to leave this bishop being undefended, I'd say. I also want to be able to leave this idea open. So I think I'm just going to go knight e5. My idea here is maybe like queen b6, white protects this, then take, bishop a6, and white gets into a little bit of trouble. If the bishop moves, I have knight c4, hitting this bishop, which is a bit uncomfortable. If white ever plays f4, I have knight g4, and this will go after the e3 square. So how will white answer? Maybe a move like rook b1 just to keep the bishop protected is not a bad idea. I don't think this trade is really really avoidable. Again, if the bishop moves, knight c4 just seems to be very annoying. Or if the bishop moves, even bishop a6. And then rook b8, queen b6. Doesn't seem like the ideal situation for white to be in. Yeah, so once again, a big thing here, just from the opening, when we made this exchange on c4, after that's the way that white started the game off. Again, the bishop wants to be here, this knight wants to be here, so knight f3, d2 to c4. This setup of pieces is not really, it's very reactionary. It's defending against black's ideas, rather than attacking or pushing forward white's own ideas. So f4 is what he should work towards doing, but f3, that's... I mean, it defends the center, so I guess in that sense, maybe it's a little bit better than f4. But again, it's all of his moves are very reactionary. They're all defensive moves. Now, the problem for white is, though, I now have the move c4. I'm attacking the bishop. And once the bishop moves away, then I have queen b6, and I can pick up this this bishop on b2. So I'm just double-checking here. c4, threatening knight takes, threatening pawn takes. If the bishop moves, queen b6. If he blocks with his queen, I can simply take on b2. I don't think my queen is in any danger of getting trapped. So I think this is just going to end up winning a piece here. Notice it's kind of important to do this move order. If you take the bishop, then play c4, white can go back and protect the bishop on b2. But now there's not a good way to deal with these two ideas here. If he takes on c4, of course, I take back. If he moves the bishop, then queen b6 picks up the bishop on b2. So yeah, so this is what happens, I think, when a player plays very reactionary. You can only hold on for defense so long, generally speaking, without making a mistake. Most players, even if they are playing defense good for a while, they're going to crack under the pressure, or they're going to make a mistake somewhere within the defenses. Whereas if you're the player putting pressure on the opponent, if you're playing dynamic, if you're making active moves, if you're making threats, putting pressure on the opponent, then it's more likely that they're going to mess up, and you'll be able to, assuming you're, being good at tactics, you'll be able to punish them at some point. So I don't think there's I just don't think there's a way to answer both of these threats at the same time. So like I said, maybe rook b1 instead of f3 would have been better, because that would have at least protected the bishop. This is just a good case of loose pieces. In this case, white's only completely undefended piece. Loose pieces falling off. So not really too much white can do about this here. If he plays f4, I have knight takes d3, so that kind of counterattacking move doesn't work. f4, I even have pawn takes d3. They get my knight, I get their knight. I mean, that ends up working too. I think knight takes is better, though, because my knight will be very strong in that square. And really, there's no other counterattacking option other than f4. Anything else white does, there's just not a way to play here. We'll go back through the game once it's finished and maybe see what white could have done a bit better. I already think back in the opening, b3 against this type of Binko gambit is not the ideal move. There's a lot more better moves than f3 for sure, or better than b3 for sure. So we might look into some of the opening options. So, I mean, maybe while we're waiting, I don't know if maybe he's realizing that he's losing a piece and just kind of waiting around here. Anyways, though, so I guess we'll kind of check the opening out in the meantime. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Yeah, so instead of b3, a lot more common moves are either to take the pawn. You could also play... usually, white's going to be taking the pawn in the large majority of situations. He'll take, black will go a6, then that's where a number of options appear. White can keep taking the pawn, white can play e3 and defend the b5 pawn, knight c3, there's also f3 and e4. There's lots of different options in those kind of situations there. If they keep taking the pawn, then black will usually go g6, bishop g7, take back on a6, castle, and black will have a lot of play over on the queen side direction of the board. Bishop aiming there, half open A and B files, queen goes to b6 usually, the d5 pawn will be a potential target as the game goes along, different things like that. So that's usually kind of the direction that type of game goes. White's advantage, of course, is that white will be up a pawn. It is a gambit opening, so white's going to have a little bit of a material lead, but he'll be under a lot of pressure. And again, players who are under pressure tend to be the ones that make the mistakes more often. Now, if white doesn't make mistakes, they will have the extra pawn and have the better position. But again, it's that's some of the danger that comes with that type of territory, where you have to really know what you're doing and be very careful about the opponent's counterplay and stuff like that to be able to survive there. So, is there anything else that maybe could have gone differently here? Yeah, I think in this situation here, instead of bishop to b2, maybe white should just play rook b1 at the start. That way there's really no discovered stuff, and the knight can always move away if it needs to. If he had played rook b1, I might have probably castled, and then knight f3 to d2 to c4 is the setup they should go for. Or knight f3, bishop f4, knight d2 to c4, attacking the d6 pawn there. Because really, white's two main plans in this type of position are either to attack d6 with bishop f4 and the knight on c4, or to play f4 and e5 and look to use their space advantage and keep pushing down the board. Those are usually the two main ideas. It's a little harder to implement these ideas when black has this wide open diagonal. Usually the pawns on b2 and b7, which changes things a bit. But at least those are white's main ideas. Black, on the other hand, is going to try to play on the queen side where the bishop points, where I also have extra space. If the pawns were still on b2 and b7, usually a plan is to play a6 and b5, or sometimes like b6, bishop a6, and trade these bishops off. Sometimes if white goes knight f3, black will go bishop g4 and take that knight so that it can't find its way over to the c4 square. Castle, and a lot of times black will also look to counterattack the center. So rook e8, move the knight, play f5, play c4, and get the knight to c5. So a lot of these are just very general ideas with this type of setup. But that's usually the direction that that black would be working in. So I feel like this opponent's just going to let the time run down. I think he had about 9 minutes when this first started. I think he's realizing he's going to lose a piece, and maybe instead of resigning, he's just going to let the 4.5 minutes run here. If that ends up being the case, I'm not going to, I feel like I've kind of said about as much as I can about the game. If he does end up just letting the time run, then I'll probably cut this part out of the video. There's really no point to watch the video if he just sits around for 4 minutes and doesn't do anything. But of course, if he does make a move and keeps playing, then I'll, at the very least, I'll pick the video up, even if I have to cut out a couple of minutes here. Okay, so it seems like he's just going to let the time run down here. I'm going to cut out that couple of minutes there. Like I said, not really much point in seeing the time just tick down for 4 minutes or more. But looks like he's not going to make a move. I've never really understood opponents that do this. I mean, why not resign? You're kind of just wasting your own time. But, it's his time. He could do whatever he wants with it. Okay, and he does end up losing the game. Okay, so let's go ahead and analyze this one. I kind of analyzed it for the most part during the game already here, but we'll just talk about it a little bit more. So here's the Binko Gambit. Generally, the ideas with this opening are if white takes, a6 takes. Usually you'll go g6, you'll take on a6. Usually stuff like this. Black fianchettos, white looks to get the king to somewhere like g2. And essentially here, white will look to pretty much defend against black's pressure, look to play a move like e5 in the center, which, as we mentioned in that other setup, is kind of a general plan as well. And black, on the other hand, will do things like queen a5, rook b8, try to get a knight into the c4 square, so maybe like knight g4, e5, c4, or knight b6, c4, put pressure on the queenside pawns. Black is down a pawn, which, so it's a gambit, but it's a gambit that's not for attacking reasons. It's more for positional reasons, which makes it a very unique gambit. So black doesn't need to attack the king for this gambit to work well. But this is usually the way the opening might go. Obviously, there's other ways that white can decline the gambit if he wants to. He could take one pawn and then play like knight c3, which is a very double-edged type of opening here. He could take the pawn and then play b6 and give the pawn back without opening up the a-file. So there's a lot of ways white can respond. b3 tends to not be so great just because, as we kind of see in the game, one of the options is to get into a Benoni opening with a with like a good improvement for black that the bishop is more open without a b2 pawn. Usually how this particular opening will arise is something like this. Instead of b5, a lot of times black also has this move e6, which is more for the Benoni defense. Knight c3, take, and this is the same, this is essentially the same setup as what we had in the game. The difference is that the b pawns are missing in the game that I just played. So the difference here, though, is the knight's supported, so there's not as much danger on this diagonal. White will do things, like I said, he'll do things along this line. Put the bishop on, he'll stop the move b5, he'll put the bishop on f4, different things like that. Though in these positions, black does have his own form of counterplay. There are little tactical tricks where you can take the pawn and then take advantage of the pin. So there's different ways that black can kind of, respond in this situation. And black ends up having a perfectly fine game at this point, I'd say. But at least in comparison to the game, again, the main difference being the missing pawns opens up the bishop a bit more, and that just helps black a little bit more. And notice how the setup that white had is not very conducive to e5 or attacking d6. This bishop can't attack d6. This knight can't get to c4 easily. e5 is not supported with a knight on f3. So white's plan in this position, or his main plans, are very hard to follow because of the opening setup that he did. So again, this ties into one of the other videos, one of the other games we had looked at, or one of the other playthrough games, sorry, from this kind of series here, where you want to make sure, even from the opening stage, that you have a plan going forward into the middle game. Here it feels like white's setup of pieces is very reactionary. It's very defending the pawn. It's defending, but it's not doing anything useful other than defending. And the problem with defending too much is that, when the opponent exposes a chink in your armor, now it's just game over here. There's just not a way to stop the threats at this point. So if the bishop had moved away, queen check, no matter what white does, we'll take on b2, and then we're simply up a piece. There is no queen trap to worry about. If white plays rook to, rook to b1 or something, we can take on c2, and then we get to d3, so the queen's not trapped. So there's really no danger for the queen, I would say. We are simply going to pick up a piece. Even if he moves the bishop away, well, then we'll just go back to, like, b6, trade the queens, and we're up a piece for free. So that's the way this particular game went. Again, I think his opening setup is a little bit misguided, and then he just kind of plays very defensively without an active plan, and then after c4, he's just losing a piece, so we've been able to punish him with tactics. So anyways, though, that's it for this game. We now have continued off with a rating of 1853, so we're getting closer to the 2000 level, which was at least kind of the first goal, I would say, in terms of getting to what rating we're going to work towards accomplishing. We might go past 2000, but at very least, this will definitely be working towards 2000 at minimum. So that's it, though, for this video. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. Don't forget to like the video, hit the subscribe button, and ring the bell notification. Leave a comment saying that you enjoyed it as well. I definitely read the comments and appreciate all of the support that people give in the comments. And yeah, that's it for this video, though. I'll see you guys around in the next one, and I'll talk with you again then. Okay, bye, everyone.